looking at how can we pick apart and tease apart the way people express their ideas to us. What happens if we start to see the unconscious moments? What happens if we can start to create the unconscious moments? So ideally after this, once we get the conversation going, we're starting to find out where the logic is broken down. Our next plan of attack, if we were going to go down that road, would start to be dealing with how a client's feeling essentially about the problem they're having. Okay, so give me a rough description. Why are emotions so important for us to be able to utilize as hypnotists? What is the value of it, and why should we pay close attention to them?
The emotion is the driver of all of your senses, pretty much. If you don't have any emotion about anything, it doesn't really matter. It's only when an emotion locks into something, either a good emotion or a bad emotion, that it starts making sort of sense to you.
Yes. And we looked at last time, we had a brief discussion about looking at the emotions behind a problem, getting the leverage, understanding how the emotion will drive the leverage. All those sorts of things come into play. Okay, but we know something that happens to people once we start to talk about their problems. Okay, what do you think happens inside our client or a subject as we start to discuss their problem? What happens to those emotions, do you think?
They will revivify it.
Yes.
That's the word, back into whatever it is. So if they're smoking, they'll think about smoking, and then the emotion that lies within smoking rears its head again.
Excellent. And for when dealing with emotion, again, this is just one style and one way to do it. When we start looking at dealing with emotions, these tend to bring on a lot of unconscious moments. Okay, we start looking at, uncontrollable laughter. It could be good or bad. We have tears, we have anxieties, we have fear, concerns, all of these sorts of things we can break down into a certain emotion. Now, where we do get stuck and can get stuck as hypnotists is trying to find out exactly how it all is, how it all works inside of a client's mind, and trying to understand when it started, what progressed through it, how it got to this point. And we spend a lot of time talking about the core emotion when we should be doing other things with it. Does that make sense? If you look at the older style of hypnosis, especially the Ericksonian movement, Erickson was big on regressions and using a lot of emotions when dealing with regressions. That's great. If you love that style, fantastic. Okay, but I want to show us a more diverse way of how we can use these and how we can start to leverage the emotions to push a client into a new way of thinking. Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's say our client's sitting in front of us. We looked at smoking. We've looked at weight loss. Let's now look at let's look at a client who has a fear of heights. Okay, another basic issue that you might find yourself working with. We're asking a client, what is it about heights that scares you? Why are you scared of them? Why do you want to fix this? Just a normal investigation process. Okay, now we know something when talking about a problem. Okay, we need to decipher the information we're getting back, whether it's being conscious or unconscious information. Okay, how do we tell the two apart? This is important before we get into the emotional side of it. How can we tell what's the conscious answer compared to an unconscious answer?
A conscious answer is one that is based on logic, and an unconscious one is based on, conscious is based on sort of flawed logic. It's just the representation of what is the underlying principle, but the unconscious will actually, it's not so direct. It won't be, I'm scared of heights because of, it's more metaphorical.
Yes.
So it'll be more, if they say something like, I'm scared of heights because, I don't know, I just don't like heights, that's probably a conscious thing. But if they go, if they start talking about, I don't know, any sort of metaphor, then that's the unconscious.
Yeah, 100%. Okay. Usually when you can hear a client talking in more unconscious terms, they might find it very hard to get the words out that they want to talk about, or they find it hard to really tell you what's going on. There's a lot of, it's like, this sort of, but it's not really that. It's sort of, and the conversation seems to steer in no direction. This is usually because what's happening at this point is you've uncovered something that's very unconscious, and your client has never expressed, looked at, or felt that problem in that way. So it's very, very hard to describe.
Yes.
Okay. So we looked at last time, just playing around with talking. Okay. That's essentially one way. We can talk all the way through this investigation process into a client's problem and actually have that as the therapy and actually do a whole session just doing that interview process. Yeah. Let's look at something else. Let's now say we're talking to our client, we're finding things out, but we're finding the conversation keeps going around in a circle. We're not really seeing the unconscious moments. We can't grasp onto what they're really talking about. The conscious mind keeps poking its head back in and out of the conversation. We can now draw their attention away from the conversation we're having with them and put it on how they're feeling.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
And this is good to keep in the back of your mind, and we've said this all along. If the process you're following or the process you're doing with your client is not working, you just do something else.
Yeah.
You don't need to see it right to the end and then think, wow, I just wasted a whole hour. You're going to chop and change throughout your entire interaction because we know hypnosis is not linear. Everyone's different. Everyone has different motivation. Everyone has different logic. Everyone has different flawed logic. Everyone has different unconscious moments. Everyone has different reasons, whys, what's, all of this stuff. So it's impossible. It's impossible to look at hypnosis linearly. If we do, that's taking the approach of, I know more about you. I'm the therapist. I'm going to tell you how to change because that's what the quote unquote, the script is telling me to do. Okay, so let's say I'm having a conversation with you and I see the conversation going nowhere. I'm asking you questions. I get a little bit of an unconscious moment. I go, yes, I'm getting there. Then all of a sudden you come back to me with a big conscious answer and it's really going nowhere. All I need to do at that point is go back to the simple ABSU formula. Okay, so being that you should be well versed in the ABSU formula, what does the A stand for? What's the acronym? What's the A for in that 4-step formula?
It is catch attention.
Catch attention. So if I wanted to use emotion, following the ABSU formula, take their attention away from talking about the problem, what could be a simple question to put their attention elsewhere that would involve some sort of emotion?
How does that make you feel?
Excellent. Simple as that.
Yeah.
Now, do you see how, although conversation and emotion, they'll blend into each other, your client will tell you how they're feeling.
Yes.
But what I want my client to do is feel how they're feeling. Yeah. That's a big difference.
Right, yeah.
Okay. So if my client's talking and I say, or we're saying, how do you feel about that? What is it exactly you're feeling right now? Where does their attention have to go?
Has to go inside.
Has to go internal.
Has to go where the feeling is.
Has to go where the feeling is. So we know that by drawing their attention away from a conversation or more talkative conversation, and we say, well, how does that make you feel, or how are you feeling at the moment? Or how did it make you feel when? And they go internal and they might spend a couple of seconds trying to find the feeling. What has this now done for us?
It has basically started the process of bypassing the critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Formula.
How can we bypass the critical thinking without attention?
Exactly.
Okay. And the great thing is when you can see your client going internal, you'll see it on their face, you'll see it in their expression. Now, what this is doing as well, it's letting me know that I've now taken control back of the conversation and the session itself.
Yeah.
Okay. So as long as I see them following along, I'm in a good place. Okay. So let's say I'm your client. You've asked me how I feel and you see me go internal and I say, well, it doesn't feel too good. Okay, so you now have a response. You've got some information.
Yeah.
For me to bypass my critical thinking, I have to bypass the conversation I was just having and feel something.
Yes.
Okay, so that's essentially the A and the B as far as the attention and bypass critical thinking of the conscious mind. They sort of bleed into each other. They become one. Okay, yeah. I've now given you an answer. What's the next part of the acronym we would have to follow?
Stimulate unconscious moment.
And this is where it gets fun, especially with emotions.
Yeah.
Okay. So how would we stimulate, or what would you do with the information that I've just given you? How would you stimulate that further to grow and ratify those emotions?
First thing I'd do is I would start echoing.
Excellent. Okay.
Go back. So that's right. It doesn't feel good, or whatever you say. Mm-hmm. Whatever you say, I would just repeat it back.
Excellent.
Possibly a little bit slower, possibly a little bit more hypnotic.
I would definitely do that. Excellent. All right. Now, what's probably going to happen, it's going to sound like this. I'll say, well, it doesn't feel too good. And you go, that's right. It doesn't feel too good. I get that. It really doesn't feel too good. Yeah, but it's, when I get to the top of the building, there's this happens, this happens. What's just happened right then?
The conscious popped its head back out again.
Yeah, so where has the attention gone?
The attention's gone away from the feeling and it's gone back up through not the feeling, it's gone back to the conversation.
Excellent. So what has this told us about the process?
The process is, it's told me the process is that I did not, or whoever the hypnotist is, just when it did it, and should have really backed up with a few more, something else to stimulate the unconscious moment, because it's like as if the unconscious moment it's like you've blown up a balloon and you've got halfway and you've run out of puff and you've stopped. Mm-hmm. The balloon's gone back down again.
Excellent. So would you agree that if we're going to look at it as just the process as a 4-step formula, if the first couple of steps didn't work, does that mean we failed?
No.
All we're going to do is just repeat it, don't we?
Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing the 4 steps in order.
Absolutely. So if my attention has gone away from this is how I'm feeling, how would you draw my attention back to it? This is where we start to gets a little bit fun with hypnosis. Oh. How would you get my attention back? Because essentially what I want you to do as the hypnotist is we're basically saying to them, I don't care about that. What just happened before?
I would ask you again to think about how it made you feel.
Excellent. So what sort of question would you ask me?
How would it, so when you say, if you were to say, when I get to the 12th floor, it says, how would you feel? So if we were on the 12th floor, how would you feel? Mm-hmm. So hopefully you come back and tell me.
Excellent. Now, what's important here, we have two different directions we can talk about. We can talk about the feeling, and it's going to be an imaginative feeling because they're sitting right in front of us, about how they think they feel. Yeah. Or, and the side that I prefer to use, I think it's a little bit easy for us to use, I'm always about making things easy, is I want to draw their attention back to now in the office. I don't care how they were feeling, because I would have found out that through the conversation, and let's say that conversation went nowhere, no matter how much attention I was putting on that feeling, I want them to draw. I need to get their attention back. Okay. So it could sound like this. I'll play both roles. You're my client, and you said, this happens, this happened. I say, well, how does it make you feel, Simon? And you say, well, I just don't feel good about it. All right. So you're telling me you just don't feel good about it. You really don't feel good about it. But you can feel something, and it's not good. You can hear the echoing. And then you say, and I can see you taking on board those suggestions. And then you say, because, I try and walk up the stairs. I try and look out the windows. People try and help me up. And I'm going to go, as the hypnotist, I need to almost stop and pause you. Okay, because that conversation, that backwards rationalization can go on for days if I let it. So all I need to do is just go, look, Simon, I understand that. And it really didn't make you, or doesn't make you feel good. I mean, right now, really doesn't make you feel good. Okay. And then again, it might spring off again. Yeah, look, Scott, I get that, but this happens. Look, I know that. I really do. But it really doesn't feel good. I understand that you want to feel something different. Do you see how all I'm doing, before I even do a technique, I'm getting your attention? Yeah. And I'm training you unconsciously. And I guess there's a bit of conscious logic in this as well. I'm saying to your conscious mind, go away. I don't need you. Pull you back. As you go out of the moment again, I'm going to pull you back. I might have to do this several times. But the unconscious mind will get the pattern, and you'll start to slow down. You'll start to follow along. Okay. Does that make sense so far?
That makes perfect sense. It makes a lot more sense than what I said.
Yeah. Look, either way, at the end of the day, as long as we're drawing their attention on something, but what's important, whenever I find myself in a tough position, or I think, what am I going to do now? What am I supposed to say? I always refer, where in the ABSU formula am I? If you're off in your tangent, telling me about ifs, whens, buts, whats, and this, that, and the other, I've lost the conversation. Yes. I need to get control back. So I go all the way back to the start, and I need to draw your attention back to the questions that I want you to answer, not the ones you think I need to hear. Okay. So let's say after a while, we're drawing this attention back, and you might do this once, you might need to do this twice, 3 times, 4 times, who knows? But when you start to see that the unconscious mind is playing along, you'll see the client start to quieten down. You're probably going to notice a lot of sighing, because that relief of this happens, this happens, this happens has a lot of energy behind it.
Yeah.
So as they're going more internal, you might get a lot of as they start to calm down as well. Okay, so we've done the A, we've done the B, you've done the S, which is just stimulating the process, and you might have to re-stimulate the process. And in regards to this, when I'm saying stimulate it, I'm saying bringing it back and almost holding on to it.
Yeah.
And we haven't done anything hypnotic yet. We haven't done the quote-unquote technique yet. That's where the U part comes into it, which is utilization.
Oh, you're not even letting me say it now.
Okay, yeah, utilization. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of things that'll probably happen or could happen.
Okay.
That's going to give you a few unconscious moments. We know the unconscious moments come from stimulating the unconscious. It's like we start playing with it. It gets more excited, so it gives us more.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you 3 or 4 unconscious moments, and I want you to decide which one you want to utilize, or if you decide to use them all together, and I want you to create a little bit of a monologue with it.
Oh, blimey.
Okay, let me give you an example. So my client's sitting in front of us, and I can see I've drawn their attention, and I get a sigh. Might get a little bit of a smirk on their face because something may have just happened. They might get a bit of a shift. I can see them starting to relax a bit. I might say, yeah, look, I understand all that's happening, but you feel something. And if I see a bit of a smirk, I might just say, there it is, right there. What's that? Because you had no idea that feeling something was so important in order to get past whatever that stuff is. Because we could spend our entire session looking at all the what ifs, but what's more important to me is the feeling that's occurring in you right now, because that's where change happens. Can you hear the suggestions in that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what am I saying, essentially? Rubbish.
Yeah. Well.
But it's all positive, isn't it?
Positive rubbish.
Positive rubbish. But I'm not doing the whole thing like, and you can feel good about things. And you can imagine yourself walking up into the building and feeling good. And you can feel powerful standing on top of that building, not worrying about anxiety or heights. What's the difference between the two?
One is very rigid and one I might not do. One, I can go, well, I could get to the top, but no, I'll still be anxious. And then once you get something that you say to me, that suggestion that's not where it is, my conscious mind will come back online and go, right, I now understand the game. So
exactly.
Play the game. But then, by making it very vague and very ambiguous and very, you may feel this, I can see that you're feeling something. You don't know what they're feeling, and probably the person who sat in the chair won't know either. So by making it that ambiguous, your unconscious will just go, yeah, I am. Yes, I am feeling something. And even your conscious mind will go, yeah, he's feeling something, so that's fine. I'll carry on doing my own little thing.
100%. I can't be too direct here.
No.
Even through all our trainings and the stuff that we've taken through with demonstrations, my whole idea of giving suggestions is almost a moot conversation when you understand the diversity of an unconscious moment. We know two things. We can either do hypnosis by giving suggestions and hoping we get them right, or we can take a client to their unconscious, hold them there and keep them there, and allow their own suggestions to filter for themselves.
Absolutely.
We've always got to come back, and this is something that it was very true when I first understood and wrapped my brain around it. How on earth would we know what suggestion to give our client? How on earth could we come up with something that would impact them so much if we as the hypnotist are coming up with it? How is that possible?
We can't. That's why when you echo back to someone, you echo back exactly what they say.
Yes, because that's their suggestion. I'm giving it back to them.
Exactly. So, I only know what's right for me. Pretty much. If you suddenly start going down the route of you telling me, then all of a sudden we're going to have that battle of that clash of egos, and you'd much rather go, look, stand there, you have all the resources, you have everything at your disposal because you are where you are now and you've managed to survive. Brilliant. So what makes you think you can't survive now? I will hold you there until the suggestion that you give yourself, you go, yeah, that's a bloody good thing. And then we bring you back and you go, that is it.
Excellent. And we know that suggestion will come through the aha moments they have or the insights they'll have from their problem. Now, the metaphor we could use to break this down so we've got something visually to keep in the back of our mind is whatever way you get your client into an unconscious moment or a hypnotic cue or an unconscious trance, whatever you want to call it, the labels are relevant. As soon as you get them there, your only role is to keep them there. However you do that, by telling a story, by doing confusion so they can't private training, the therapy we're talking about has just expressed itself as that's the way the unconscious mind works. So we're not doing anything foreign. So everything we've just done should make sense because you've just been through it. You're there right now. That's a good place to be.
Great place to be.
Excellent. So no questions at all?
No.
Excellent.